Hello everyone, I'm Pauline Thornhill. Thanks for joining us. Well, this week on Land and Sea, we take you to Exploits in Notre Dame Bay. During the summer, it works like a magnet. Exploits draws people to the old resettled community and gives them peace and quiet. Well, in this show, producer Fred Greening has some of its stories and a lot of good memories.
Midsummer in Exploits. A deserted town wakes up after a long winter's nap. Exploits was once a proud and thriving community of around 800 people. People fished and farmed and built ships, but that was 100 years ago. By the 1960s and the early 70s, it would become another place gutted by resettlement. Many buildings still stand with their pride intact, but others are humbled, waiting for the inevitable. And others, well, only the skeletons remain. What Exploits does have are peace and tranquility and lots of good memories. By late 1970, nearly everyone had abandoned Exploits. Only 3 Newfoundlanders were left. They were joined by a couple of new residents, an American draft dodger and his wife. Her name was Kitty Drake. Her husband was Dyer Drake. Nearly 40 years after she first landed in Exploits, Kitty Drake came back to stir up the memories.
Here we are, 2 young Americans, basically from town life in an environment we didn't know. Why would we think that we could survive when the Newfoundlanders were having to all move out? But, that's what you are when you're young. You're idealistic. You think you can do anything.
It was during the height of the Vietnam War. U.S. soldiers were drafted into the army and marched off to an unpopular conflict in Southeast Asia. Many refused to go and took refuge in Canada. A handful came to Exploits. One of them was Dyer Drake. In the summer of 1971, he and Kitty appeared on Land and Sea.
We hope to make a little money from lobstering and the salmon fishery. And then we have hens, and last summer we sold quite a few dozen eggs to the various summer people that come down here.
We're trying to be self-sufficient, trying to grow everything that we need for the winter, which are mainly turnips and carrots and beets and onions and potatoes and cabbages, which all can be kept in the root cellar very well. And then the protein we get mainly from the sea. I bottle up salmon and tuna and mussels and codfish, and I hopefully will bottle up clams this year. And then we dry our cod. And I began to learn to snare rabbits last year, and I got a few dozen rabbits.
The real thing for me was when the Atlantic Ocean on the outside froze over, and I walked down the lower harbor and up on the headlands there, and as far as I could see, frozen. And I just sat there and said, frozen? The ocean is frozen. Where are we? Where are we? What a sight. 5 o'clock in the morning, getting up in the spring and going out and pulling herring nets and, checking your lobster. It's just hard work, but lots of good times. I wouldn't not do it again.
For a short time, 3 other American couples lived in Exploits, dodging the draft, but they didn't hang around. Only Kitty and Dyer would last 6 years on the islands. By that time, they had had enough. They couldn't gag down another winter in exploits.
In the summertime, I spent my entire time gardening because I needed all that food to put in the root cellar to get through the winter. Bottling things, you know, if I went and dug clams, I'd get enough to have at least 26-pint jars for the winter. Mussels for the winter, fish for the winter, everything for the winter. You did nothing but for the winter. And in the winter, you were in the woods cutting trees for the next winter. Yeah.
Were you ever depressed?
Depressed? Lots of times. Oh, lots of times you were depressed, and lots of times, most of the time you're just exhausted. But no, there were certainly times when you would be depressed and you'd think, I'm never going to get anywhere. I mean, we had a 28-foot skiff. We didn't know how to get it up in the fall of the year. How were we going to get that up? There's no cranes, there's nothing. I got to pull this 28-foot wooden skiff out of the water. Next thing I know, Wince is over, Richard and Lydia are over, Gus is in, they're in the woods, they're cutting logs down, stripping them, laying them out, greasing them with cod liver oil, and up she comes. Next thing I know, she's, you know, cradled in and done, and all we had to do was put the tarp over her. I wouldn't have had the faintest idea how to do that, you know, so all the time that happened. I think for me, the strongest memory or the strongest feeling that I have is being an outsider and coming into a totally foreign environment and having all the old-timers around me showing me how to survive that way, because we had no electricity, no running water, you know, learning to jig. I just have a deep-seated admiration, respect, and appreciation of the Newfoundlander. And I think that in many ways, I'm very fortunate to have had that experience. And I think in many ways for younger people in Newfoundland, they don't even have that kind of understanding of what it meant to live in an environment like this. So, no, I really respect the Newfoundlander.
Kitty and Dyer left exploits and studied at Memorial University in St. John's. Dyer eventually returned to the U.S. to a government pardon. Kitty remained in Newfoundland and became well known in the restaurant and food business. They would leave behind their home and exploits, the one with no electricity, no bathroom, no running water, the one they bought for $300.
It looks pretty much like it did then, except we didn't have any deck around it. It was just a porch out and steps down. And you can see our chicken house up there. We had geese and chickens, and we even had a Newfoundland pony.
Really?
Babe, yep. Yeah, Babe was a great horse, brought in our wood. And there was a beautiful little barn, which we never got fixed up, and that's gone now, and that's too bad. The oven was wonderful, marvelous bread.
But Kitty's stove is not gone. It's still there. And most of her pots and pans, coveted by the new owner, Julie Evely of Comfort Cove.
I have trouble getting heat in it. It must be something I'm doing wrong.
No, I don't think so. Probably it's so old, probably needs new liners. But no, it did beautiful bakes and pies and cakes. And the thing was going all the time with hot water on that side and food cooking on that side. And here we used to have all the wet mittens and socks dripping down on everything. It always smelled like wet wool. And no, got some of the frying pans too.
Yes.
You've done wonderful things.
To try to keep as much of everything as we could.
Great.
Yeah, and Kitty,
This is
I've just
great.
always really wondered what this was. I have no idea.
You know, that's an old-fashioned for beating eggs and whisking
Really?
things. Instead of a whisk, you had. That's what that was. I would presume my mother sent it to me.
We didn't really change the structure of the house. All we did was basically clean it out and just take down some old wallpaper. And we didn't change anything structurally in the house other than to put in a bathroom and just some basic things. And because I love the house the way it is, so we saved whatever we could save, we saved.
My gardens are gone. The cute little barn that I always wanted to fix up has, of course, collapsed. The house looks great, and it's nice to have a bathroom. You know, a real bathroom is really nice. No, the house, they haven't really ruined anything in the house. I think it's just, I think it's wonderful. So, no, my impression is great, and I love all the tall grass. I'm so glad I forgot to tell them that. I must tell them that. I hate lawns. And it's so wonderful to see all that beautiful long grass waving in the wind. No, I love it. I'm glad they have the house. A lot of good memories.
The schools and the churches and the stores will forever be silent in exploits. When the permanent residents moved out in the 1960s, no one moved in, other than a few Americans dodging the draft. But during the summer, this is cottage country. Many of them have family roots here, but this man does not. He's Ivan Wolfrey, a central Newfoundland doctor who simply fell in love with the peace and quiet of an abandoned town. 43 years ago, the harbor pilot moved out of exploits, and Ivan Wolfrey met him on the wharf.
I said, Andrew, where are you going? He said, I'm moving into Botwood, my new house, and he just built a new house in there, and he said, they've moved the pilot station into Gover's Harbor, so there's no need of me being here anymore, so I'm leaving. So I said, what are you going to do with your house here? And he said, gee, he said, I guess it'll fall into the ground like all the rest of the houses here. So I said, you wouldn't consider selling it to me? And he said, well, what do you want that for? And I said, well, I just like to have it. So we made a deal on the wharf for best deal I ever made, $550. I don't know why I came up with that figure, but we settled on that, and so we've had the house ever since.
He retired from his medical practice in central Newfoundland 17 years ago. He then became a ship's doctor with the cruise lines, and during the winter, he still travels the oceans of the world. But there's no place he'd rather be in the summer than right here in Exploits. The Wolfreys are here 6 months of the year. Their children spent the summers here. Now the grandkids do the same, in a house that has a distinctive paint job and a story.
We had several Americans here in the 1970s. They were conscientious objectors from the Vietnam War, and they were always looking for something to do because they never had very much money. So one year I decided that I'd have my house painted. So we asked one of them if he would paint it. And he said, oh, yes, sure. So I said, well, I'll bring you down to paint, and when I leave in the fall, perhaps you can paint it. So I brought down some red and white paint. And as you know, I mean, most of the houses in Newfoundland, certainly in these communities, were all painted white with some sort of a trim. So Louise and I decided we'd have a red trim, so we just left the paint with them. And a few weeks later, I get a call from this guy, and he said, look, he said, I don't have enough red paint. And I kept thinking to myself, boy, that's odd, he doesn't have enough red paint. If he ran out of white, I sort of could understand it, but red. So anyway, the next year I came down and to see what color my house was, and I just came in the harbor, was absolutely shocked, and he came in and Max was waiting, and he said, what do you think of the house? And I said, boy, it's certainly different. he said, well, he said, I thought I'd painted red and white and it looked something like a lighthouse, and I thought you'd like it, and so we were stuck with it. They have how many yards?
Ivan Wolfrey is never without his bag of medical tools, and it's not uncommon to see someone draped over the kitchen table while Ivan stitches up a cut leg or removes a fishhook from a head. In return, Ivan might call in a favor someday. His wife may run out of onions, or he'll need a piece of copper pipe. The barter system is still alive and well in Exploits. Ivan loves to relive the memories of his 42 summers here, and loves to spin yarns like the time the music director and his friends from the U.S. came, searching for their ancestors.
So we came in here in the living room, and he sat here at this organ, and Louise and I sat there, and the other two stood there, and they put on quite a rendition. And can you imagine? I mean, Louise and I were sitting there, and we were listening to this guy who was playing, who was just an incredible musician, and his first cousin, who was a soprano from La Scala in Italy, and his friend who was a tenor from the Metropolitan, in my little living room in Exploits, and so he was going with the organ, and eventually he broke the pedal because this organ's 150 years old and hadn't been used very much over the years. But can you imagine the feeling? I mean, we're sitting here and this tremendous performance of a tenor, a soprano, and a big organist from New York. So that's the story of my broken pedal. Well, this is the old telephone that was here in the house when we came, and this is another telephone that connected directly to the lighthouse because the harbor pilot lived here and he needed the direct line. This is a high chair that was here, used by the children who grew up in this house, and as a matter of fact, even one of their boots was left behind. So this house is basically the same as it was when I moved here in 1966. We wanted to leave the house exactly like it was. We knew the original owners, and we're sort of almost consider ourselves the caretakers of his house, even though we own it. But everything here dates back to when the house was built, and the original linoleum is still on the floor. The original stove is in the kitchen. Even the sewing cotton that Lady used is still on the wall there. And so it's an original house, and we'd like to keep it that way. It's heritage piece as far as we're concerned, and we're really in love with the house, and we really enjoy living here. So people down Lower Harbor even get their water. There's loads of water.
So now you've got telephones, running water, flush toilets?
We have everything like that now.
My.
I mean, now cell phones, and now they've gone digital, so I just got my digital bag phone, which
You're
is
wireless here, are you? We were wireless.
And we
were wireless, but not network.
And we have satellite,
Oh,
TV.
good
Isn't
God.
it amazing?
It is. You like it better or worse? There's something nice with all that silence.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many generators going and stuff now.
Yeah.
Exploits has become too modern for Kitty Drake. The summer places with their patio lights and noisy generators are too far removed from the silence of the exploits she remembers. If Kitty were looking for another place to get away, it would be to another isolated island where a dark night would be altered only by the moon and the northern lights. But different strokes for different folks. There are those who don't come to exploits to relive the memories. There are those for whom today's exploits simply satisfies an appetite for a quiet getaway. The protected harbor serves not only the cottage people who live here, but it welcomes boaters from all over. They savor the peace and the tranquility of a Newfoundland summer in an isolated outport. A singer and a guitar work like a magnet, gathering a few people on a local wharf. Here's Lloyd Thornhill from Conception Bay South.
Came on this sloop Dundee, my grandfather and me, round Nassau town we did roam, stayed awake all night, got into a fight. Oh, I feel so broken, I wanna go. So hoist up the John B. sail, see how the mainsail sets, call for the captain ashore, let me go home. I wanna go home, I wanna go home. I feel so broken, I wanna go home. mate. He got drunk and he broke into somebody's trunk, and the sheriff had to come and take him away. Sheriff John Stone, why don't you leave me alone? This is the worst trip I've ever been on. So hoist up the John B. sails, see how the mainsail sets. Call for the captain ashore and let